All right, so welcome. Happy Friday to everybody. Let's see, can I get myself a little more light? Get myself a little more. Kind of a dark individual, so need a little more light than others. So, yeah, it's Friday. You guys have made it through the week. It's a relatively short week since we didn't have class on Monday. So hopefully you guys have studied that video. You guys are ready for the quiz, ready to go. So this last part, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go over the final terms that you guys are gonna need to know for the quiz. And yeah, I'm gonna do that. Maybe a little inspirational Friday, and then you guys go take the quiz. All right. So let's begin. So I think I need picture in picture. All right. So modeling terms 2. This is manipulating and hotkeys. And I gave you guys some hotkeys that you guys should know, and those will be on the quiz today. So let's go. So how to change an object's pivot. So in this image, you'll see that the object pivot is way off from the center of the object. To fix this, go to the third panel in the command panel and click on Affect Pivot Only. Once activated, the arrow on the translate gizmo will become outlines like they are in this picture. So they're going to turn into outlines. They're going to outline the X, Y, and Z coordinates like so. All right. Next, turn on the snap at the shelf menu. It's the magnetic icon with the 3 on it. The pivot can now be snapped to anywhere on the viewport using the translate gizmo. Snap it to the inner edge of the model if that's where you want to put it. So you put it like somewhere right here. All right. So another thing that I do is whenever I'm trying to center the pivot of an object to it, I usually will hit that Affect Pivot Only, and then I hit this button right here where it says Center to Object, and it just centers it to wherever that object is, the center of it. It'll find the geographic center or the X, Y, and Z coordinate center, and it'll place the pivot right there. So now my pivot is at the center, and I can use that to move my object around. All right. So to turn off the Affect Pivot Only button, and the gizmo will return back to normal. Now start working with the model, and the pivot will remain in its new location. If you're going to mirror the object with the symmetry modifier, make sure that the model half is centered on the grid origin, right? So what you want to do is you want to center it to where you want to mirror it, and then you want to snap it to the 0, 0, 0 of the world, and then use that to mirror it, and that usually gets you a pretty good result because you know that what you're mirroring is the exact same thing, and it's going to snap right to that middle line. All right. So smoothing groups define whether a surface is rendered with a sharp edge or smooth surfaces. On the left, the bottle has no smoothing. The middle, smoothing has been assigned to only the highlighted group of faces right here. And then the right one is smoothed using 3 different smoothing groups, right, on the body, the neck, and the bottom. All right. So this is, you can see where the smoothing group stops, right? Because there's a harsh edge right here, right? There's a harsh edge right here. So you can see where the smoothing groups have been assigned, right? If you use just one smoothing group, the transitions between all of these would be extremely soft. So smoothing groups are numbers assigned to the faces or patches of an object. Each face or patch can carry any number of smoothing groups up to the maximum of 32. If 2 faces or patches share an edge and share the same smoothing group, they will render as a smooth surface. So it's not going to treat it like these are angular surfaces. If they don't share the same smoothing group, the edge between them will render as a corner. You can manually change or animate the threshold values for smoothing groups in the smoothing group assignment using the tools as an editable poly in the polygon element and in the edit mesh modifier. So they all have ways where you can edit the smoothing group, right? So it's important to keep this in mind because it's going to affect your low poly models a lot, right? It's going to be the difference between your model looking like it was made for a low poly game or something closer to photoreal. So these are things that you guys need to start keeping in mind whenever you're making a model. Boolean operations. Think about this is going to be important. It's going to be on your quiz. Boolean operation. A Boolean object combines two or more objects by performing a logical operation on their geometry. The objects typically overlap, but they don't have to. The original two objects are the operands, and the Boolean object itself is the result of the operation. The following illustration shows some typical Boolean operations. These aren't all the Boolean operations, but these are some that you will run into in life inside of 3ds Max and most 3D applications. So the fence is operand A and the cat is operand B, right? So from the upper left and right, A minus B. So you're just subtracting the cat from the fence. So it looks like he's missing from the fence. All right. Second to upper left is B minus A. So instead, you're subtracting the fence from the cat, which is going to give you an outline. If you see that this brown outline right here, that is the fence material, the fence geometry, right now mimicking the outline of the cat. It cuts out everything else and leaves just the imprint or the cookie cut of the cat. All right. So the second to lower left, right here, this is a union. So now you've just brought those together. So now these meshes are one. And I use a different combination of these depending on what I'm working on at work too, because a lot of the workflow I use now is like more spline and NURBS and Boolean workflow, so I have to use these all the time now. And the lower left is the intersection. So this is just taking the cat and the fence and then giving you the difference. All right, here's the intersection. Here's where they meet. Here's what's left. All right. So these can be very useful for you whenever you're modeling things and you don't know how to cut a hole in something. You should, learn how to cut holes in things because it's a huge part of modeling, but this will give you a really quick turnaround. The problem with this a lot of the times that people don't realize is it kind of jacks up your geometry because the points don't match 100%, so it's having to do some weird triangulation. So a lot of the times after the fact, after you've done your Boolean operations, you want to go back and clean up your mesh. So that's something that you guys have to keep in mind as well. You guys might not understand what that means right now, but as the more you guys start using this stuff, you'll start to see, oh, okay, this is what he means by you got to clean up your Booleans after you do the operations, because sometimes the geo that you get after just isn't good enough for modeling or rendering purposes, depending on what engine you're going into. All right. So for geometry, the standard Boolean operations are ZXD, VZD, V. The Boolean object contains the volume of both original objects. The intersecting or overlapping portions of the geometry is removed. An intersection, this is supposed to say the intersection. The Boolean object contains only the volume that was common to both original objects in other words, where they overlapped. In subtraction or differences, the Boolean object contains the volume of one original object with the intersection volume subtracted from it. 3ds Max includes three main types of Boolean objects: Boolean compound object, pro-Boolean compound object, pro-cutter compound object. And in addition, Boolean operations are available with editable splines and body objects. So let's see. So I think this first one's supposed to, instead of BZVD, I was like, what the hell is that? It's supposed to say union. So the first one is actually union. Glad I caught that. I was like, what am I reading here? I think I might have messed that up. So union, intersection, and subtraction. All right. So now let's get back to this. All right. So the chamfer, in general, chamfer refers to rounding off a sharp edge or corner. 3ds Max includes two 3D primitives that incorporate chamfering. There's a chamfered box and the chamfered cylinder. In addition, chamfer options are available in various other program features. To find these, check the chamfer entry in the index of this manual. In the context of NURBS, however, the chamfer curve is a dependent object that is a line segment that connects two curves. It is controlled by the curves it connects, and by two length parameters that control the distance back from the point of apparent intersection of the parent curves. So what that means is your chamfer is going to be determined by how these two lines intersect, right? So if these two don't meet anywhere, well, you're not going to have a chamfer depending on what operation you're using, right? So you need 2 points to meet, and then what it's going to do is it's going to chamfer. So these guys, there's nothing to chamfer here, right? But if I put a point right here and I pull it up, this point now can be chamfered because these two lines are meeting each other, right? So these are things that you guys are going to start picking up on as you model more and as you understand, right? So depending on the program you use, they're going to use chamfer and bevel a little interchangeably, right? Sometimes chamfer refers to the soft, right? It's going to make like a soft kind of a transition for your line or your point or whatever it is you're trying to chamfer. But sometimes bevel, right, in other programs will mean chamfer. So these things are usually, depending on if you're in Maya, Modo, they might change. But for 3ds Max, what you guys need to understand that chamfer is soft and bevel is usually hard, right? And that's usually the best way for me to describe it. All right. So with clipping planes, it's very important that you guys understand that clipping planes let you exclude some of the scene's geometry to view or render only certain portions of the scene. And clipping planes are a pain in the butt sometimes, depending on the scale of the model that you're making. And that's why a lot of the times, in my scenes, you'll see that my near and far clipping planes are pulled up all the way, and I'm gonna get some flickering in the viewport, but I just deal with it just so that I don't have to deal with the clipping of any objects or anything like that. So clipping planes are useful for rendering selected portions of a scene that have a complex geometry. They can also help you create cutaway views. Clipping plane settings are part of the camera's creation parameters. The location of each clipping plane is measured along the camera's line of sight, its local x-axis in the current units for the scene. So it also depends on the units that you're using for your scene. So if you're doing like millimeters and different things like that, like really it has some issues with really small measurements. So millimeters, centimeters, you're gonna need to mess with your clipping planes, because you're generally discussing things that are very small or micro, and it has a problem with things that are like ginormous, like an entire city. You're gonna have weird clipping plane issues in those situations. All right. So the way they do it in 3ds Max is they give you the option to slide your far plane and your near plane, and then you kind of have to use your best judgment to really get the best viewport settings. So clipping planes are a part of a camera's general parameters. Viewports can also have clipping planes. You can you set the viewport's clipping plane via the viewport right-click label, and usually what I'll just do is in 3ds Max there's a feature which it's not a feature, it's a hotkey. You just hit X on the keyboard, just tap X, boom. It pulls up a little search bar. You can search for anything you're missing in there. So I'll just type in viewport clipping, boom, click it. It pulls up a little bar on the right-hand side of my screen, and then it gives you these two little triangles that you can use to affect your viewport clipping planes. So I'll show you guys that right quick. I'll show you what viewport clipping planes can do and how they can affect your scene. So if you look over here to my scene here, the viewport clipping plane isn't bad right now, but I haven't. Okay, so here to the right side, you can see that I have these two. So if I hit X, I'm gonna just type in view. Actually, let me just show you guys what I mean by that. So once if I start to pull those out, you see that because it's starting to affect my shading, because it's saying, hey, you want me to view this from really far, right? So that's how these kind of work. So the problem is now when I zoom in, right? So when I zoom in, you see how it's cutting off this little edge right here, right? That's the viewport clipping the object, and you're essentially saying, hey, when the camera or the viewport gets this close to the object, what you want to do is just clip that out of my way. I don't want to see it. I want to be able to see what's going on under. But if I want to fix that, and I'm like, well, I need to see the rest of this, I'm going to pull this slider all the way down, and as you guys can see, the further I pull down to say, hey, I want to see as far as this, or far, way further back than this, it's going to start messing with a little bit of the shading. So it's a give and take, right? It's one of those features that I feel like they're going to fix in the future, because I think it also has to do with some graphic features inside of 3ds Max. So it's one of those things that it's a give and take with the object. But the closer I get, right, the less I can see. All right, so it doesn't clip. It doesn't clip at all, right? It doesn't clip at all. So now you guys can see. Oh, okay, that's what's going on. But right, you guys can see I can slide my viewport clipping, and if I bring it all the way out, now I can zoom in all the way to my object, and I don't have an issue or whatsoever. But once I start getting back out here, you're going to see, oh man, I'm starting to run into this issue where everything's clipping into each other. So what I want to do is then bring this slider all the way back to where, boom, I've got my scene back. All right. So, and the thing is, this is going to be one of those sneaky, weird things that you run into in the real world, and you're like, what is this? Why is it doing this? Why does this look like this? My model doesn't look like this when I'm up close, but it looks all funky and ugly right now. You need to go hit X on your keyboard. Boom. It's going to pull up this search menu, and then you can just type in viewport clipping, or you can just type in clipping, right? And it's going to pull up viewport clipping for you. So that's it right there. So just type in clipping like that, and then it pulls up this bar, this handy dandy bar that you can use to set your near and far clipping planes. All right, so that's going to be it for the lesson today. You know, I'm going to probably cut this one short just because, you know, you guys have that quiz and I want to give you guys time to, you know, so I'll upload this video as well, and you guys can, you know, watch it and then take the quiz if you need to, or do whatever you need to do. You know, there's no real way for me. I just need you guys to understand this information, right? However you guys get this information is the most important aspect for me, because, you know, I can quiz you all day and you guys can pretend to know it, but if you don't know it, you don't know it. So I want you guys to learn this information as properly as possible, as well as possible, and yeah, that's gonna be pretty much it. So I'm just gonna do my little spiel for the day, which is usually, you know, just a little motivational thing for you guys.